Time will shake the ground while the for something to let it go to waste with everything at stake. Not that I would take it all back. I just wanna make this thing last, but we're running out of time. We were doing alright, holding on, but I'm losing the fight. Could we run away? I know if we just hit ground, running, closing off all the world with the light coming in, bending before we break. Don't you know you and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away. Run away, run away. You and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away. You would never stay for someone that wasn't worth the wait. Counting down the days. I know when I'm moving onward, I just wanna trust in your word, but we're running out of time. We were doing alright, holding on, but I'm losing the fight. Could we run away? I know if we just hit ground, running, closing off all the world with the light coming in, bending before we break. Don't you know you and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away. Run away, run away. Check. You and me, we can run away. You and me, we can run away. Hold me close till I get up. Time is barely on our side. I don't wanna waste what's left. The storms we chase are leading us, and love is all we'll ever trust. Yeah, no, I don't wanna waste what's left. And on we'll go, through the wastelands, through the highways, till my shadow turns to sun rays.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. Yes, I'm wearing an outfit. Don't judge me for it. It's Halloween month, so I want to kind of enjoy it after I came back from this human social event. I hope everybody's doing fine. As you quite are aware, for this stream, I will be doing an ASMR reading stream today, which is our continuation of the book Icefire, which I'm actually quite excited to read again. Turns out I actually read 3 books from Crystal Lacey and then I just stopped. So basically I read until Firestar, halfway, not Icefire. I thought I was reading just A Fire Within and Icefire, but actually I've read it all the way to Firestar, but then stopped halfway in Firestar. So I don't remember what happened in Icefire. The only thing I remember probably is just the continuation of the story with David, Lucy, and Liz, as well as I think it was Stacy. But yeah, so I'm going back into this story completely new, completely unaware of any events, etc. And I do apologize if my model is a bit sensitive at the moment. I'm still prepping some little bits here and there that I need. So yeah, just need to grab some stuff. So there we go. Alright, so I've got my drink, which I have 2 drinks. What happened to my other drink? Oh, there it is. There it is. Sorry. Got my 2 drinks. That's good. I've got my blanket. I've got my hoodie. Yeah. I've got my book. I've got some sketches. The reason why I have sketches is because I am working on... Actually, I am working on... The reason why I have a sketchbook beside me, I actually got 3 sketchbooks actually, is I am actually planning to make another series of letters, but not specifically dragons. So that's going to be a completely new area for me. But before I start tackling that, I'm still working on another project, which involves my book that I'm writing. So it's going to be a separate project from my book. In terms of my book coming out this year, I still need to get people to reread it and correct the grammar. So I'm at that stage at the moment. So a lot of rushing, a lot of prepping, a lot of... yeah. But anyways, Icefire by Crystal Lacey. For 4 Val Shivers, with special thanks to Joseph Maud, Tom Gleason, and Michelle. So, Joseph and Tom got their last name, but not Michelle. Okay. Right. So we start off with a letter, actually. Redirected to David Rain, aka Well Aware Children's Publishing Ltd, Boston, Massachusetts. David Rain, 42 Wayward Crescent, Scrubly, Massachusetts. Dear David Rain, thank you for sending us your novel, Snigger and the Nut Beast, which we now had time to consider. Unfortunately, although we think your writing shows promise, we do not feel that a story about talking squirrels is currently right for our list. We are sorry to disappoint you on this occasion and wish you every success in the future. Yours sincerely, editorial assistant. Well, actually, it doesn't have an actual name, which seems to be a mistake, but who knows? Anyway. Now, the fun part is, there's no part 1 or part 2. Like, legit, there's no part 1 or part 2. This is it. So, anyway. The Wishing Dragon. David If your face grows any longer, your chin will be scraping the soles of your shoes. Elizabeth Pennycettle hung up her apron and half scowled, half smiled at her student tenant. What's the matter? Give you one guess, the tenant muttered cheerlessly. He walked into the kitchen, his mouth turned down in a curve of disappointment. In his hand, he was flapping a letter. As he approached the kitchen table, he pushed the letter under the snout of a dragon, which was sitting by a jar of raspberry jelly. Here, torch that. The little clay dragon remained unmoved. On the far side of the table, Mrs. Pennykettle's daughter, Lucy, remarked, "You mustn't say that to the dragons. They're not allowed to burn things, are they, Mom?" "No," said Mrs. Pennycettle, glancing at the letter. "I take it that's another rejection?" David nodded. "Complete with coffee stain. This makes 14 now, and they all say the same. Dear Mr. Rain, thanks but no thanks. No one wants to hear about Snigger the Squirrel." Lucy immediately put down her sticks. She had been busy modelling a brand new dragon, a handsome, if slightly bemused-looking creature with wide, flared nostrils and enormous paws. She picked up the letter and frowned. "Well, I think it's the best story ever." "You're biased," said David, peeling a banana. "I wrote it for you. You're bound to say that." "It's not a bad rejection, though, is it?" asked Liz, reading the letter over Lucy's shoulder. "They do say your writing shows some promise. Perhaps you should forget about Snigger for a while and start working on something new." "Yes!" exclaimed Lucy, spinning in her seat. "The Adventures of Spiky the Hedgehog." Through a mouthful of banana, David said, "I'm not writing about silly hedgehogs." "But you said Gazooks wrote Spiky on his pad, and he underlined it twice. Gazooks is your special dragon. You've got to do what he says." David sighed and let his gaze drift across the kitchen. It settled on the top of the fridge where a so-called listening dragon sat. A studious-looking, bespectacled creature with ears like a couple of large rose petals. Dragons were everywhere in this house. Elizabeth Pennycettle made them for a living in a room upstairs called the Dragon's Den. Gazooks, the dragon that Lucy had spoken of, sat on the windowsill in David's room. Liz had made him as a welcoming gift when David had first moved into the house. In general appearance, Gazooks was like most of the Pennycettle dragons, green and scaly, with oval-shaped eyes and short, rigid wings. But in his left paw, he carried a small white notepad, and in the right, he held a sawed-off pencil. He was special in the sense that, now and again, when David had been writing his squirrel story, Gazooks had seemed to help things along by scribbling a word or two on his pad. The last thing he had written, some weeks ago now, was the word Spiky. Lucy had immediately decided that this must be the name of a hedgehog she had once glimpsed in the garden. But David had refused to be so easily swayed. And as the autumn days had gradually lengthened, his mind had dulled to the possibility that there was any meaning to the word at all. Indeed, if the truth be told, he was slightly tired of the presence of dragons, and embarrassed by the fact that he had once allowed himself to believe that they might, in some way, be real. So, when he spoke again, his manner was blunt. "Lucy, let it go. I love Gazooks, you know I do, but he only writes things because I imagine him doing so. But he's no more special than this one you're making." Lucy sat back, looking incensed. "This is a wishing dragon. He can make things really happen." Across the room there was a slight hoot of derision. But this time, the dissent was not from David. It had come from the pottery expert, Liz. She walked over and inspected the dragon, looping her red hair behind her ears so it wouldn't trail into the still soft clay. You'll be lucky, my girl, to make a true wishing dragon. You'll be lucky, my girl. To make a true wishing dragon takes years of practice and careful naming. Mind you, you haven't done badly with him. His paws are very good. Excellent, in fact. They're out of proportion, surely, said David. He looks like he's wearing baseball gloves. Why are they so big? Because, said Lucy, drawing out the word like a piece of gum. You put your thumbs in his paws when you make a wish. Mom, can we kill him? Please don't say I have to smush him. I'll think up a special name right now. And she closed her eyes and concentrated hard. Grrr, she said, meaning the name would begin with a G. Grrr. Ref? Said David, breaking in unexpectedly. Gareth? Lucy turned up her nose. What made you say that? Asked Liz, flipping the handle on the outside door to let the penny kettle's tabby cat, Bonington, in. Bonington trotted straight to his bowl. He sniffed at his desiccated tuna-flavoured chunky chunks, turned and mewed to go out again. Looking puzzled, David said, Don't know. It just came to me. From Gazooks, said Lucy with a sparkle in her eye. Yes, but he wrote it in a funny sort of way. Show me, said Liz, pushing a scrap of paper in front of the tenant. Jot it down exactly how you saw it. So David picked up the pen and wrote G''RETH. You left the A out, said Lucy. Liz turned the paper around. No, I don't think he did. That is an archaic spelling. I've seen dragon names written that way before. Which, by the way, for those who don't know, Oshimi's name also has an apostrophe in her name. As is my real dragon name. My dragon name has a couple of the apostrophes in it. Just like I'll let you guys know. She drummed her fingers on the tabletop. And you saw Gazooks do this? David nodded and chomped his banana. Not only had he pictured Gazooks doing the scribble, the dragon had stomped his feet several times and thrust his pad forward as though keen to push the name right to the forefront of David's mind. How do you say it? Asked Lucy. Gareth, said Liz, with a hard G. G. Gareth, repeated Lucy. You say it. She gave the tenant a nudge. Gareth, he said tiredly, just to please her. He looked at the dragon with an impish smile and sent it a silent, disparaging. Lucy, try making a wish, said her mom. Lucy's mouth fell open in astonishment. Is it allowed? It's David's dragon. What? He coughed. I don't want it. You named him, said Lucy. You have to keep him. David shook his head. No, he said firmly. One dragon is enough for me. Lucy's face took on a hurt expression. You can't stay in this house if you don't believe in dragons. Yeah, well, muttered David, tossing his banana skin into the trash can. He traced the grouting in the floor tiles with his toe as if he had something more to add. Something he didn't want to talk about now. Liz noticed the movement but didn't comment. The maker may have one wish, she said, turning the dragon face onto Lucy. That's a rule among dragon makers. It must be something beneficial and completely unselfish. You can't just wish for a bar of chocolate. If you do, the wish will turn on you. Okay, said Lucy, resting her thumbs in Gareth's dished paws. I wish With snow. Snow? Hooted David. How's it beneficial? They like it, said Lucy. Dragons like snow. Some of us like snow. Some of us like snow. Some of us like to just hurl up and just sleep through the winter. But to be fair, I like snow. That's no denial for me. As if to prove it, a gentle "hrr" sound echoed around the walls of the house. David, who heard this sound many times before and had never quite got the bottom of it, ignored the rumble and frowned in disbelief. Why do dragons like snow? And don't tell me they're fond of skiing. David, come on. Seriously? No, we don't ski and we don't snowboard. Come on. This tenant, I swear, this tenant in this book, sometimes his questions are so illogical, it makes my head hurt. Anyways. Lucy shook her head till her ponytail danced. No one really knows, do they, Mum? No, said Liz, carefully shaping one of Gareth's wings. But when it does snow, Lucy went on excitedly, they sit by the windows and watch it, don't they? Yes, said Liz, turning Gareth back and forth on his stand. This is really good. This is very good, Lucy. You're coming along in leaps and bounds. There, said Lucy, and stuck out a pimple of tongue at the tenant. To take the wind from her sails, he gave a weather report. Oh, bad luck. Sun's out and shining. Not a flake of snow in sight. He grinned at the penny kettle women in turn. They stared back as if to say, give it time. Time! David shot his watch hand up. Oh no! He exclaimed. I should have been at school ages ago! I'm supposed to be having a tutorial with... Leaving the end of his sentence hanging, he shot down the hall in search of his coat. Liz patted Lucy's arm and told her to work on Gareth a little more. Take him up to the den when you're finished. We'll kill him when I get back. Grabbing her car key, she went after David. Come on, she said, overtaking him on the porch. If it's that important, I'll give you a ride. On the drive into Scrubbly, Liz said quietly, You seemed a little uptight in the kitchen. Not just about Gareth. Is there something on your mind? David ran the zipper of his bag back and forth. I'm meeting Sophie for dinner tonight. A smile spread slowly across his face at the mention of his girlfriend's name. She says she wants to tell me something important. I think she might want me to move in with her. I see. Do you think you will? David bit his lip and looked the other way. We'll miss you, said Liz, taking his silence as a yes. It's going to be hard telling Lucy, though. I'll come and see you, regularly, I promise. Liz smiled and touched his arm. If you need to move on, then that's all there is to it. You can't stay in our mad dragon house forever. Don't worry, we'll cope. She brought the car to a halt at the gates of Scrubbly College. Go on, we'll talk about this another time. I hope you're not too late. Who is this guy again? The one you're having the tutorial with? Dr. Bergstrom. He's a polar research scientist. He's only in the country for 3 or 4 weeks, doing a sort of lecture tour. Bergstrom, said Liz, running the word like a spell of her tongue. Is that Swedish? Norwegian, but he works in Canada with polar bears. Liz nodded and lifted her gaze. Her bright green eyes seemed suddenly very distant. Well, he won't mind this weather then. David turned to the windshield. Impossible as it seemed, it was specked with snow. There you go, that's the very first chapter, guys. I need to take a drink. Ay, ay, ay. Whew. Next chapter. A very strange essay. That's amazing, David gasps. Where did that come from? Liz rolled down her window and caught a few flakes. Never underestimate a wishing dragon. David gave her a withering look. Liz, Gareth did not do this. He pulled up his collar and got out of the car. I'll probably stay over at Sophie's tonight. Thanks for the ride. I'll see you tomorrow. He blew a snowflake off his nose and looked at the sky. Weird, he muttered and hurried indoors. The elevator on the ground floor opened conveniently, and he was up 4 flights to the geography department quicker than he might usually have expected. He swept through the map room, catching a globe with the corner of his bag and almost spinning it off its stand. By the time he reached the offices along the faculty corridor, he was slightly out of breath and warm under the collar. He took a moment to steady himself, then knocked at a door labeled Seminar Room. "Come in," said a voice. David eased himself inside. He'd been hoping to see at least 3 other students, but the padded orange chairs around the low coffee table were all abandoned. He grimaced and glanced at the clock. He was 45 minutes late. The tutorial had happened without him. "Dr. Bergstrom, I'm really sorry," he began. Gosh, it's freezing in here." It was then he realized the window was open. A chill breeze was rattling the vertical blinds, making them clatter against the glass. On an open wooden stand beside the large chalkboard, a row of journals were flapping their covers. Even in his overcoat, David shuddered. Dr. Bergstrom was standing at the window, looking out, his hands pushed deep into the pockets of his slacks. He was wearing a plain white cotton shirt, with the sleeves rolled loosely up to the elbows. Not a goosebump could be seen on his muscular forearms, just a gentle stream of honey white hairs that matched the color of those on his head. "You must be David," he said without looking around. His voice was even, as soft as the snowflakes floating past the window. It carried just a hint of the country of his birth. "Yes. Excuse me, aren't you cold?" A smile touched the corner of Bergstrom's mouth. Right now, off the shores of Hudson Bay, the temperature will have fallen low enough to turn the sea to an icy slush. That's cold, David. Glacial to you. Moderately chilly to the Inuit people. Still rather warm to a polar bear. It's all a question of acclimatization. Do you want to tell me why you're late? He gestured to the arc of empty chairs. David unbuttoned his overcoat and sat. I got held up at home, sorry. Bergstrom closed the window and joined him. He had a classic Scandinavian appearance. Wavy, well-groomed, collar-length hair and a beard so fine it seemed taped to his face. Yes, your colleagues had a theory on that. They thought you were probably talking to your dragon. The tips of David's ears flared red. Many times in the past he'd regretted the day that he once let slip about keeping zooks. The news had circled the geography department quicker than a virus infecting the internet. Bergstrom, swift to see his students' discomfort, dismissed any awkwardness with a wave of his hand. Please, don't be embarrassed. I'm really quite intrigued by dragons. And as we don't have time for our formal tutorial, I thought we might spend a few minutes chatting about them. I thought I was here to talk about geography. You are, said Bergstrom, opening a hand. The study of the earth, its climate and inhabitants. That's geography, isn't it? We all have our place on this spinning rock. Why leave out dragons? Because they're not real? David said bluntly. They're mythical creatures. We made them up. Excuse me for a minute. You humans made us up. You humans made us up. Oh. So I guess I don't exist. didn't humans made this up? Come on. Petey, where's that music from? Remember, we have 2 of them. Which one? The W or the B? No, don't... Right. I've got the files. Why? Well, I did not touch your computer. I did not touch determination, if that's what you're asking. You must have relocated them somewhere. I'm pretty sure of it. Try finding in the... Sorry, guys, I'm just gonna pull this quickly up. No, not that one. Is it this one? No, that's not this one. No. Books for publishing. That one. Film. Short film. Music department. No, that's the wrong one. Music ideas. Nope. For feature film, a music department. Right, here it is. So we've got B. Okay, so if you go for the... Sorry guys, I know that I'm supposed to be reading for the ASMR. Right, if you go to the search bar of your File Explorer, write down Q. Just C-U-E. Just that. And it should give you a few files if you still have it saved on your computer but relocated. C-U-E. Q. And you have to give it time to find it all. Well, it's supposed to say, it should say C-U-E, oh, yeah, C-U-E space and then 2 numbers at the end. So, for example, it will be Q07 and then it should say demo and then the name of the musician. If you at least can find one of those, then you should have the whole entire file. But if not, then if you have an SD card or a USB stick that I can plug it in and then import it for you, then I can do that for you. So, oh, you got it. All right. Anyways. Yeah, no worries. You're welcome. Alright, so I'm quite distressed about David's remark saying that we're mythical creatures and that we made them up. You guys didn't make us up. We existed at some point, but we decided to leave. And yet, they've survived for centuries in our lives. I'm just curious to know how they came into yours. David glanced sideways, hiding a frown. Was he being teased here for being late? Where was Bergstrom going with this? Shouldn't they be talking about glacial activity or rock formations or sea levels or something? What was the point of yapping about dragons? I'm a tenant with a woman who makes them, you said, answering the question as plainly as he could. She's a potter. She sells them at the market in Scrubley. She has a room in her house called the Dragon's Den, and she's the one you should ask about dragons. Leaning forward, Bergstrom said, I'm asking you. Come on, give me a folk legend. Anything. You have to have a story hidden away somewhere. David shook his head. You're not serious, surely. Bergstrom studied him carefully for a moment. You forget, I live and work among the Inuit. Stories to them are like well-chewed bones, to be passed from mouth to mouth so their flavor might be shared and long remembered. Much of the history of the Arctic regions has been told across the light of a seal oil lamp. Stories have a unique power, David. The Inuit believe they can capture souls. He reached into his trousers then and drew out a drew out a gold-rimmed pocket watch. He opened it on the table in front of them. This saved my life on the ice one time. Would you like me to tell you how? David steered his gaze to the watch. The back of the casing was scratched and dented, and the watch glass clouded by weather and age. A lot of history had passed between its hands. Okay, he ventured. Good. You first. What? It's a trade. Your story for mine. Briefly, I'm afraid. We don't have long. David snorted into his hands. A trade? A trick more like. Only Lucy could have cornered him better. Okay, but it's not that much of a story. It's about a dragon whose name was Gawain. He was supposed to be the very last dragon in the world, and when he died, he shed something called a fire tear. That's like his essence wrapped up in a teardrop. Bergstrom nodded, a pale, light twinkle in his eye. He had strange eyes, David thought, deep set and slightly close together. If he stared your way for any length of time, the gaze became a bold, imperious squint. David thought he had seen the look somewhere before, but for the moment he couldn't quite place it. A dragon's power in a teardrop, mused Bergstrom. That sounds intriguingly precious. The sort of thing you wouldn't want falling into the wrong hands, I expect. A woman called Guinevere caught it, said David, but I'm not really sure what happened after that. I fell asleep and never heard the end of the story. I dreamed she took the fire inside her, though. She was trying to preserve the spirit of dragons. That's why she went to Guilana, anyway. Guilana? Bergstrom's blue eyes narrowed. A hermit, a sort of wise woman type. She lived alone in a cave on a hill. She told Guinevere about the tear in exchange for one of Gawain's old scales. Bergstrom folded his arms and nodded. That seems a poor exchange. Why did Guilana settle for a scale when she might have had the fire of Gawain herself? I don't know, said David with a shake of his head. He thought about that many times himself and wondered in passing if Bergstrom had. Why did he get the gnawing feeling that Bergstrom, far from his listening to the tale, was interrogating him to find out what he knew? Told you it wasn't a very good story. On the contrary, it's an excellent story. Merely incomplete, but it's given me a good idea for your essay. Essay? Bergstrom smiled again. Your supervisor asked me to assign you one. Not just you, all the students I've seen. He flipped open a briefcase propped up against his chair and brought a small sheaf of papers to his lap. So, I would like 2,000 words by a week from Friday on the existence, or not, of dragons. David felt the color drain out of his face. You're joking. That's impossible. How on earth am I supposed to write that? Bergstrom shuffled the papers and said, maybe where on earth would be better than how. That's the geographical challenge, David. What sort of terrain would a dragon inhabit? Find the terrain and you might find the dweller. I'm sure the library will have some interesting literature. Or perhaps your dragon-making landlady could help. Liz? She's always so secretive about the dragons. Well, here's an incentive to unlock her, then. Bergstrom pushed a leaflet across the table. Details of an Arctic field trip. I've agreed to take a limited numbers of students up to my polar research base in Chamberlain to work firsthand with my team for a while. David scanned the flyer with an envious gaze. Chamberlain? Wow, I'd love to go, but geez, it costs $700. I can't afford that. I'm a week behind with my rent as it is. Bergstrom delved into the briefcase once more, this time bringing out what looked to be a piece of polished bone. It won't cost you a penny if you write a good paper. The essay I judge to be best of the bunch will receive a free passage. How's your coursework? David tilted a hand. Then maybe you could use some help. Tell me, do you believe in good luck charms? David glanced at the bone, which he had guessed by now was an Inuit carving. It was creamy white and about the same length as Bergstrom's hand. Its shaft was etched with the baffling varieties of whorls and symbols cut into the surface by something rough. Bergstrom handed it over. It was made from the tusk of a narwhal, he said, and given to me many years ago by an Inuit shaman called Angartakok. I cannot pronounce the name, and I'm sorry if I'm butchering the name, guys. A man who claimed he could fly to the moon, commune with spirits, and turn into a wolf. Be careful, David. What you're holding is a tornak, a talisman of fortunes. If you shake it tightly in your left hand, the spirit of the narwhal will breach your consciousness and point you along the path of true destiny. That's the theory. Try? A talisman of fortunes. David was tempted to throw it in the trash can. It was politeness rather than fascination that made him switch the carving to his left hand. He closed his eyes and shook the tusk hard. At once, Gazooks popped into his mind. Great, that's all he needed. Go away, David hissed. What are you doing here? Gazooks, as usual, ignored the slight and quickly scribbled a word on his pad. Laurel. David's eyes blinked open in surprise. Any luck? Asked Bergstrom. He reached over and took the carving back. David shook his head. No, sorry. Laurel. What is that supposed to mean? Before he could search his mind for an answer, the ring of an alarm broke into the silence. With the tip of one finger, Bergstrom snapped the pocket watch shut. I'm afraid that's all we have time for, David. Still, it's been a pleasure talking to you. You don't mind if I ask you to see yourself out? David said no and stood up, a little bewildered. He hitched up his bag and turned to go. He was almost at the door before remembering to ask. Your watch. You never told me how it saved your life. Bergstrom slid the watch into his pocket. Ask me again when you hand in your essay. Oh. All right, said David, looking disappointed. He said goodbye and slipped out quietly. For a moment, after the student had gone, Bergstrom sat back staring at the door. Behind him, the snowflakes swirled and landed, making small drifts on the thin-lipped sills. He rolled the talisman through his fingers, rubbing his thumb along the length of the shaft as he was shaping a lump of clay. And then in a muted voice he spoke. Stay close to them. Follow their Oma. And what had been an amorphous sudden took shape, and the shape it made was that of a bear. Did I even read that right? Stay close to them, follow their Amona, and what had been amorphous suddenly took shape. That sentence did not make any sense, guys. It really didn't. The reason why I said this doesn't make sense is because the sentence said, and what had been amorphous suddenly took shape. And the shape it made was that of a bear. I'm a bit stuck with that sentence. I'll probably have to research that because it didn't make any sense for me. That one. Because I don't know if that was intentional or if that was a grammar mistake, like a sentence mistake, but oh well. But how is everybody doing? I'm just taking a sip of drink, so. Also, you never explained to me, Red, why you need the files. Because you didn't explain to me why you need the files for. Because I think I remember giving them to you because you wanted them at some point. But then you said, nah, I don't want them. And then suddenly you need them again. So, I'm a bit confused. And why you're going back and forth a bit with them. So, anyway, next chapter. A sticky encounter. The snow fell steadily throughout the night. By morning, it had covered Wayward Crescent with a generous icing, deep enough to bury a snow boot. David discovered this fascinating fact as he lay in bed dozing. He'd been dreaming he was sitting on a drifting ice floe in the Arctic, looking across the cold, black ocean at an island shaped like a jagged tooth. As his sleeping mind pondered the significance of this, he became aware of movement behind him. Something large and heavy was scraping the ice. The sonorous thud of its swaggering steps, sounding like the beat of a hollow drum. Boom, boom, closer, closer, until the humid snort of seal-stained breath was wetting the skin on the back of his neck. He shuddered, far too frightened to turn. The animal opened its mouth to speak. Mom, if I stand here, right outside David's window, I can't see the top of my boots at all. Oh, groaned David as the dream bubble popped and the Arctic disappeared north once more. That was the trouble with this house, he thought. You couldn't even have a decent dream without a loud 11-year-old ruining it for you. With a sigh, he rolled over onto his side and promptly came nose to whiskers with Bonington. Oh, yes. And on top of the noisy child was the cat who usually slept under the blanket, but had chosen to camp on the pillow that night. Morning, David greeted him. Bonington opened his mouth and yawned. The resulting stench was surprisingly close to what David imagined raw seal might be like. He grimaced and got out of bed. Slipping on his sweatshirt and a fresh pair of jeans, he drew back the curtains and assessed the weather. The garden was truly covered. In the center of the lawn, the long brown stem of the penny kettle's bird feeder was the only spike of color to have survived the fall. Icicles were hanging off the roof of the shed. The rock garden looked like a small ski slope. David shivered and clicked his tongue. Winter had never been his favorite season. What do you think? He said, rubbing out a small patch of condensation so Gazooks had a clearer sight of things. The special dragon chewed his pencil in silence. David hurled against the glass, and in the canvas so created he wrote the word Laurel. What does this mean? He muttered, watching a tiny rivulet of water dribble through the O until it resembled the planet Saturn. He pressed a finger to its center, and at once a large belt of snow came sheathing past the window, landing with a whomp on the garbage can outside. David jumped back with a frightening start, almost treading on Bonington's tail. From the dragon's den above, he thought he heard the echo of a gentle "Rrr." Snowballing dragons. Hilarious. Not. Dragging a comb through his mop of brown hair, he followed Bonington into the kitchen and almost tripped over Lucy in the process. Hey, get out of the way, he fussed. What are you doing down there, anyway? She was kneeling on the kitchen floor, digging around in the bottom of the freezer. Nothing, she said, jumping up and slamming the freezer door shut. She leaned back against it, pushing her hands into her fawn-colored car coat. Dirty little puddles of thawing snow were leaching from the soles of her bright red shoes. Will you come into the garden and help me build a snowman? I'm having breakfast, David muttered, brushing past. What's she up to? He wondered. Is she hiding something in the freezer? There was only one way to find out. Oh, I meant to tell you, Luce. If you look on the bookshelf in my room, you'll find a little present from Sophie. That did it. Lucy was gone in a flash. In another flash, David was down on his knees and pulling out the bottom drawer of the freezer. It was loosely packed with frozen veggies, but in a space at the back behind the bags was a grey plastic box with a pale blue lid. On top of the box there sat a dragon. David frowned. He knew this creature. Its name was Gruffin, and it usually sat on a shelf just inside the dragon's den, where it was supposed to guard the doorway. But what was a guard dragon doing in the freezer? What exactly did the penny kettles have in that box? A remnant of dragonkind, perhaps? A fragment of scale or tooth or claw? The thought both excited him and made him shiver. Wouldn't that be something to present to Dr. Bergstrom? Organic evidence of dragon life. He picked Gruffin up to move him aside, and that was his first mistake. Immediately his fingertips began to burn. It was a cold fire rather than a flame, of course, but the principal effect was identical. Pain. As David let out an inflated whimper that seemed to stretch across several seconds, the stupidity of his action dawned on him. Gruffin's surface temperature was the same as the freezer, 0 degrees Fahrenheit. That alone was enough to cause blistering and frostbite, but the secondary effect was even worse. He couldn't let Gruffin go! The difference in temperature between the dragon's cold scales and David's warm skin had caused his fingers to bond to the glaze. Heat. He needed a source of heat. He had to get Gruffin off, and quickly. He reached for the hot tap over the sink and was just about to turn it when a voice screeched, "No!" Liz swept in, casting a scowl at the open freezer. Oh, well, it's supposed to be... I thought it was Lucy, but it's Liz. "Run cold water. Hot will crack him." And using a dish towel to support Gruffin's body, she pushed them under a slow, cold stream. "What's happening?" asked Lucy, running in. She had a glossy-backed wildlife book in one hand and a pretty little listening dragon in the other. She gasped in horror at the sight of Gruffin taking a shower. David's face turned bright cherry red. Caught dragon-handed. This was bad. I was moving him to get to the broccoli, that's all. Broccoli for breakfast. That's a new one, David. No, I was planning a surprise meal. "He wasn't," said Lucy. "He was looking at the..." She bit her tongue and went to the freezer. "It's all right, Mom. Gruffin guarded it properly." "Good. Bring the box over here, would you?" "But..." "Lucy, do as I say. I want to show our inquisitive tenant what's in it. If I don't, his curiosity will never be satisfied, and you only cause more distress to my dragons." With a gentle tug, she separated Gruffin from David's fingers and placed him safely on the table. Lucy fetched the box and gave it to her mum. "Thank you. Okay, are you ready?" David nodded. "One quick peek, and then it goes back." "Mom, are you sure?" "Quite sure," said Liz, and she lifted the lid. A fine wisp of icy vapor rose like a genie into the kitchen. From all around the house came a gentle "Hrr." David gulped and leaned his body forward. Inside the box was a glistening snowball. Next chapter. Breakfast news. "A snowball?" he said, looking cheated. In actual fact, it was more like a lump of off-white ice cream, frozen so hard it had grown a few extra icy ridges. "Not just any old snowball," said Not just any old snowball," said Lucy. "Mom's kept it forever since she was little." She dug around in a batch of papers in a letter rack and pulled out a small square photograph. "That's Mom, when she was 8. "Wow," David laughed. With a matching red hat with a pom-pom, scarf, and gloves. She was holding the snowball out at arm's length as if she had caught a falling star. "Sweet," he said, propping the picture up against the toaster. So, why have you kept it all this time? Liz marched across the kitchen and put the box away. We all keep little reminders of our childhood. You have your teddy bear. I have my snowball. It's nothing to do with dragons then. Liz looped back her hair and looked at him hard. I only wondered because Lucy said they liked snow. Lucy changed the subject. Mom, Sophie's given me a book about hedgehogs. Very nice, said Liz, and cast her eye upon the dragon that Lucy had brought in. What's Grace doing here? David's mood became suddenly glum. As of last night, I'm her keeper. Lucy looked up from the pages of her book. Why has Sophie given her dragon to you? Because Sophie has a new job, he said thoughtfully. And where she's going, she can't take Grace. Oh, said Liz, looking concerned. Is this what she wanted to tell you last night? Yes. She's leaving the wildlife hospital and going to work with elephants for a while. In a zoo? Pipped Lucy. Mom, can we go? No, not a zoo. A game reserve in Africa. What? Lucy closed the book in shock. How is she going to come and see us from there? She isn't, David told her bluntly, spilling cornflakes into a dish. She'll be gone for 8 months. She flew out early this morning. She had to take a snap decision about the job, which is why she didn't come and say goodbye. She wanted you to have the hedgehog book in case we ever find Spiky. Lucy's bottom lip dropped a little. Africa, she mumbled as it finally sank in. Meow, went Bonington, springing onto a chair. His plaintive cry seemed to sum up the mood. Well, that's a bit of a blow, said Liz. But if she's gone, she's gone. There's all there is to it. David sighed and ate a cornflake. Come on, 8 months isn't all that long. Liz gave his arm a gentle squeeze. The time will fly right by. You'll see. What you need is an occupation. I've got an occupation. I'm a geography student. I meant right now, to take your mind off things. After breakfast, you can clear the patio. What? And you can cook dinner too, as you were planning a surprise meal. Just because your poor heart's broken doesn't mean to say you're excused for gruffing. Him? Cook? Lucy looked on horrified. We're all going to be poisoned. Pride, if nothing else, forced David to say, I happen to make a very good lasagna. How? Went Bonington. Not from Chunky Chunks. Sorry, boners. Okay, that's settled then, Liz said briskly. It will make a nice change, someone else making dinner. She patted David's arm. The apron is yours. Something with broccoli would be nice. The snow on the patio was soft and unbroken and came up in a huge meringue-like blocks. David launched load after load onto the lawn. Lucy, trying hard to build her snowman, squealed every time a wedge came near her. But she complained only once when David pretended that he'd seen a hedgehog and hit her with a chunk that exploded on her head and showered down into the hood of her coat. She packed a snowball and tried to retaliate. It missed and thudded into David's window. That reminds me, he said as she blew Gazooks an apologetic kiss. What happened to Gareth? He's in the dragon's den, being killed, she replied. David glanced at the upstairs rooms. In the window of Liz's pottery studio, a dozen or so dragons were peering out. Why do they like snow? He asked again. You must have some idea. Lucy shook her head. Will you help me now? David rested his shovel and joined her on the lawn. You have to pack it tight like this, he said, compressing the snow with several hard pats. Then roll it around and let the loose snow stick. And off he went up and down the lawn till the ball was so big it needed both of them to push it. Lucy made a head and plonked it on. She was about to set off to find twigs for the arms and stones for the eyes and nose and mouth when the sky grew dark and it started to rain. "Oh dear, snowman abandoned," said David. Lucy didn't argue. She was tired and complaining that her feet were wet. David sent her back to the house while he made a detour back to the shed in order to put the shovel away. As he was dropping the latch on the shed, he thought he heard something moving on the lawn. Just the faintest swish of snow, but enough to make him turn his head. The lawn was covered with the interlocking tracks of human footprints, but toward the top and center were some larger marks, certainly not made by human feet. Picking up a rock, he walked nervously towards them, his heart beginning to beat a little faster. He was a meter or two from the first indent when he realized they were nothing more than a small arc of stepping stones peeping through the snow. He laughed at his stupidity and tossed the rock aside. For one ridiculous second he thought he'd seen the tracks of what? Prints like that could be produced only by an animal of some considerable size, and as far as David knew, no one had ever yet reported polar bears roaming the yards of Scrubley. Next chapter, The Mystery of the Tear. The rain fell and continued to fall. By late afternoon, when David drifted into the kitchen to begin the preparations of his promised lasagna, the rooftops and trees had been rinsed of snow and the garden was beginning to look green once more. In the center of the lawn, the snowman had sagged like an old used pillow, his head almost merging into his body. Bonington was out there, sitting in front of it, looking like a damp, discarded rag. David frowned and tapped the window. Bonington didn't budge. Nuts, thought David. That cat is bonkers. He tweaked the blinds shut and began to fix dinner. Within half an hour, he had the lasagna in the oven and broccoli and carrots ready to heat. Liz and Lucy came in about 40 minutes later, drawn by the aroma of garlic bread. David was pleased. His quote-unquote occupations had taken his mind off Sophie, and Liz was in a better mood now as well, though she did complain once when she tried to wash her hands and found the sink clogged with carrot peel. "Old habit, sorry," David said. "We always peel into the sink at home." He dipped in his hand and scooped out the blockage. Lucy set the places, dinner was served, and soon everyone was sitting down to eat. Not surprisingly, Lucy ate all her lasagna and didn't die on the kitchen floor as she expected it. But when seconds were offered, she politely declined and suggested that Bonington might finish off the dish. "Where's Bonington, by the way?" said Liz, glancing down at the half-full cat bowl. "In the garden last I saw," David said. Liz leaned back and opened the blinds. "Oh, look at him. Silly animal. What's he doing in the middle of the lawn? He must be frozen from his whiskers to his tail." "He's still there?" David craned to see. "He's been in that position for over an hour. Perhaps he likes our snowman," said Lucy. "Your snowman's taken a bit of a battering," Liz muttered, standing up and knocking the window pane. "He looks more like a bear than a snowman now. Bunny, come in." "Bear?" said David, thinking back to the prints that weren't. "How do you work that out?" They have a sort of hump in their backs, don't they? Maybe you need a potter's eye to see it. Speaking of bears, I meant to ask, how did you get on with your Arctic visitor? Lucy, go and fetch Bunny in, will you? Hand me your plate while you're at it." Lucy rose from her seat and gathered up her plate and David's too. As she handed him over, David answered Liz's question. "Fine. You'd like Dr. Bergstrom, I think. He's very charismatic. He gave me a sort of a talisman to hold and said Narwhal would show me my path of true destiny." "What's a narwhal?" asked Lucy. "A whale with a horn like a unicorn." "Is it magic?" "More importantly, did it show you your destiny?" asked Liz. "I don't know, but I saw Gazooks write something on his pad. I don't suppose you know what laurel means." Hardly had the words had time to leave his lips before they were met with a loud crash of silverware. Lucy squealed and brought her fists to her mouth. All the knives and forks had clattered to the floor, spinning into every corner of the kitchen. They might have not been followed by the dishes as well had David not jumped up and steadied Liz's hand. Whoa! Are you all right? What's the matter? The normal, healthy pink of Liz's cheeks had drained to a shade on the white side of grey. Her eyes were staring into nowhere. David guided her onto a chair. Must have stood up too fast, she mumbled. She took Lucy's hand. I'm all right now. Come on, help me pick up these things. No way, said David. You stay put. I'll pick everything up, said Lucy. And I'll wash the dishes, David offered. Goodness, now I do feel faint, said Liz. She rubbed David's arm. Leave it. We haven't had our dessert yet. Apple pie in the fridge. I'm all right, really. David found the pie and brought it to the table. As he served it into the dishes, he glanced at Liz again. She looked anything but all right. She seemed shocked and flustered, and her hands were shaking. Did the word Laurel mean anything to her? It was Lucy who kept the intrigue going. Is Laurel the name of someone? She asked, plopping the silverware into the sink. I thought it might be the name of a dragon, muttered David. Lucy soon squashed that. Dragon names begin with a G, not with a L. That's right, isn't it, Mom? Actually, not really. A dragon's name can be anything. It all depends on where the dragon is actually coming from. At least my name doesn't start with a G. Or with a L. So. Yes, said Liz, offering no explanation. She picked up a carton of cream and poured some over her portion of pie. Dr. Bergstrom talked about dragons, said David, casually lobing the remark at Lucy, but all the while keeping an eye on Liz. He assigned me an essay about them. I have to write a 2,000 word on whether dragons exist or not. That's easy, mocked Lucy. Of course they existed. Yes, it's all very well you're telling me that, but in an essay I have to have some sort of proof. It would help if I knew where dragons lived. They like mountains and snowy places, said Lucy, where they like to cool off when they've been flying. Okay, then answer me this. Why has no one ever found evidence of them? There isn't a single museum in the world that has a dragon's skull or a scale on show. If dragons had truly existed, someone, somewhere, would have dug up a bone. Suddenly, out of the blue, Liz spoke. Why has Dr. Bergstrom assigned you this essay? David lifted his shoulders. For the challenge, I suppose. If I do well with it, I might win a chance to visit the Arctic. He told them about the field trip of Chamberlain. Why am I getting so many notifications? Hello? Turn it on silent and it's still vibrating my phone. Sorry. Will you see polar bears? Lucy asked brightly. Tons of them, if I manage to get there. Come on, you're the experts. Give me a clue. Why has no one ever found the remains of a dragon? Because they don't understand what they're looking for, said Liz. It's true. Humans don't know what they're looking for. It is actually true, guys. Actually, I will give you a quick example of some human theories of why no one can actually find a dragon's bone. It's because humans tend to forget that we are magical creatures. Okay, we do have some magical properties depending on what type of dragon we are. Some dragons have special qualities in their scales. Some dragons have special qualities in their claws, teeth, fangs, etc. And, But from where I'm from, as a dragon, we actually do not leave remains behind. We actually dissipate after we're gone. An example would be my mother, who passed. I don't talk about my mother that often, but my mother passed after, well, actually during the war that happened between my kind and some other creatures. I'm not going much into detail with that, but she died because of the war. And well, when she passed, her remains disappeared. So if I were to go back, because I cannot go back anymore. I'm exiled from that world. I cannot return. But if I were to return and I were to visit that old battlefield, you will be only able to find the bones of the other creatures that were fighting in the war, but you will not find any of the dragon bones that are left behind, because that's basically how our anatomy works. We don't exist after death, or our remains don't exist after we die. So that's where I'm from. I don't know about other dragons. It's different for every type of dragon. The way where I'm from, that's basically how we pass on, basically. So if I died, if I was in my dragon form and I'm not in this accursed form as I am now, in a humanoid form, I'll probably dissipate into complete nothing. So little lore, I guess, for you guys. I don't speak a lot about my lore, but this is a little bit of my lore. So anyways, where was I? Okay. A sudden hush fell over the kitchen. Not a single "her" echoed around the walls. Liz rose to her feet and turned toward the sink. Dragons are spiritual creatures, David. Far removed from the image most people have of them. They were born from the earth, they lived for the earth, and when they died, they returned to the earth. Their bones and scales became one with it. What, they just dissolved, you mean? No, they changed. As all things must. Legend has it they formed a layer of soil, a layer we know today as clay. David felt his heart hit a sudden bump. He looked at the listening dragon on the fridge and thought about Gruffin, Gareth, and Gazooks, all of them lovingly molded from clay. So, your dragons are real in a funny sort of way? Liz and Lucy exchanged a glance. All things have their Oma, David. You simply have to learn to sense it. Oma? What's that? An ancient word for fire. Not a crackling burny fire, said Lucy, keeping her voice to a reverential whisper. The fire that comes from within, said Liz. David nodded as he thought this through. What about a dragon's fire, then? That comes from within. That's crackly, isn't it? It's specially crackly, Lucy said. David laughed and threw up a hand. Now you're making it sound like a breakfast cereal. Come on, stop talking in riddles. Dragons are spiritual, fair enough, but they're obviously flesh and blood as well. If their bodies eventually turn to clay, what happens to their fire, crackly or otherwise? Can I tell him? Lucy turned to her mum. Yes, then go and bring Bunnington in. David glanced through the window again. The penny kettle's cat was still by the stillman. What was the matter with him? When dragons die, they cry their fire tear, said Lucy, and each tear trickles into the ground where the real Oma is. David thought a moment before replying. At the earth's core, you mean? Lucy gave a vigorous nod. Dragon fire helps the world to breathe. Don't be silly. The earth doesn't breathe. It does, she insisted. Doesn't it, Mom? In a manner of speaking, Liz said quietly. Go and fetch Bonington now. Lucy pushed back her chair. What about Gawain then? David said quickly. His fire tear didn't go into the ground. When Guinevere caught it, what did she do with it? Lucy looked at her mum, who said, Go on, I ask you to go. But now, please. With a sigh, Lucy exited the kitchen. David, now wary that he overstepped the mark, chose his next words carefully. I'm sorry. I know this means a lot to you both. I'm not belittling the story, honestly. It's just the legend of Gawain is a great angle for my essay, and I really want to win that prize, and I appreciate any help you can give me. Liz rested her hands in the washing up suds. It was several seconds before she replied. I'm sorry to disappoint you, David, but neither myself nor Lucy can answer your question. No one knows what became of the fire of Gawain. The legend is that Guinevere caught the tear and hid it. What? David sat up slowly, feeling a knot of tension in his stomach. I thought she absorbed it into herself and became sort of a human dragon. Liz laughed and looked at him over her shoulder. None of us could possibly endure such a force. But if she hid it, then where is it now? David, if I knew the answer to that, Before she could finish, Lucy hurried in, fighting to keep a hold of Bonington. Mom, he's hissing and clawing and ow! Bonington wiggled out of her arms, only to be scooped off the floor by David. Hey, what's the matter with you? Do you think he's been bitten? Do you think he's been bitten? Asked Liz. David checked him over. Doesn't look like it, but something spooked him, that's for sure. Look at his eyes. They were wild and staring, as large as pennies. David loosened his grip and the cat jumped down and ran straight to the door. Lucy, wary of being scratched, backed up, covering Bonington's cat flap. They watched him turn a frustrating circle before he bounced onto a chair and then onto the drain board. Now what's he doing? Liz said, astonished. Perhaps he's seen another cat, said Lucy. David shook his head. He's looking at the snowman. Snow bear, said Lucy. I can tell the shape now. Do you think he's scared of it? I'm not sure, said David, and he glanced at Liz. She was staring at the snow bear and stroking Bonington to calm him down. And then she said something quite unexpected. I'd like to meet your Dr. Bergstrom, David. He does sound very charismatic. I feel as though I know him in a strange sort of way. Thank you for cooking dinner tonight. Lucy, be an angel and do the drying up. I'm going to the den to finish Gareth. And she pulled the blinds down again and left the kitchen, shutting the snow bear out of sight. Whew. Alright, just gonna quickly get a sip. I find this quite suspicious, actually, this entire story so far. It's very suspicious. Actually, do I even have a... No, I don't have a tissue for my nose. Ashen, could you please be a darling and give me a tissue, please?
Your nose?
Yes, please. Sorry, I'll just have to quickly mute so that I can blow my nose. Sorry guys, my daughter and Ashen is here. You're adorable, sweetheart. Yeah, you are. No, you can't have that. It's Mummy's. Yeah, it's a bag. I don't know if it's a bag or not. It's a book. Mummy's reading a book. Oh, jeez. You wanna put the star in the bag?
Take your change. Wave.
See you later, sweetie. Oh, she's being adorable. She's being adorable. So if you do hear her in the background, I'm so sorry. Ashen is literally taking her to the because we actually have a river in our cave, so he actually washes her there from time to time. So that's basically what he's doing. So if you hear her like squeal or anything in the background, it's just her. Anyway, I'm trying to read and I can't because I hear her in the background. She wants to join in the ASMR stream. Anyways, next chapter, Online with Xana. With nothing better to do after dinner, no soccer on TV, no girlfriend to visit, David retreated to the quiet of his room and decided to make some notes for his essay. His mind was a jumble of polar bears and dragons, and he needed the stark simplicity of a computer to separate those elements and keep things focused. But as he waited for his computer to boot, he couldn't resist another glance into the garden. The ice bear, or snow bear, as Lucy liked to call it, stood regally in the center of the lawn, being steadily sculpted by the drizzling rain and looking more and more like its real-life counterpart. Why was Bonington so mesmerized by it? Could the cat see something that human eyes couldn't? And if he could, was he scared or awed by its presence? David closed his eyes and put the ice bear into darkness. But even as that visual shutter came down, a virtual world opened, and there, at its bleak and frozen center, was a genuine polar bear. David jerked in surprise, but held tight to the image. The bear was sitting in a field of broken ice, its fur dragged leeward by a howling blizzard. Spickles of snow whipping up around its paws. David reached out to it with his mind. "Who are you?" he asked, and felt his heart tremble as the great bear squinted through the ice wind at him. It trod its spectacular column-like paws and opened its black-lipped mouth to speak. "You have email," it said. Or rather, that was what the computer said. With a start, David opened his eyes, and the polar bear disappeared back into the ether. Annoyed, David swiveled to face the monitor. He pointed the cursor at his email inbox and immediately let out a mild groan. "Oh no, what do you want?" The sender of the message was Xana@worldmail.com. And please, guys, this is just a made-up email. It's not an actual email, so don't start trying to email this thing, okay? Just a quick disclaimer. Anything that's written in this book is probably not a real email or a real address, so don't look it up or anything. Well, you could, but then you'll probably get no results. So, just a quick disclaimer. David clicked his tongue before thinking of doing the same with his mouse. Susanna. Zana. Martindale was a girl in his department. She was a goth. She had a face as white as a hard-boiled egg, and she dressed from head to toe in black. Black-tiered skirts full of tassels and fringes that danced across the laces of her black boots. Black t-shirts, usually sporting with mystic pictures of wolves or Indians or a heavy metal band. Jet black hair, very long and very straight and usually festooned with beads or braids. Black rimmed eyes. People sometimes called her Zan Zan, like a panda. Black nails, fingers and toes both painted. And what really freaked David the most, her black pneumatic lips. He had sometimes thought that kissing Zana must be like smooching with a pair of black sausages. Not that he wanted to smooch with Zana. She was one scary licorice stick. She was friendly enough in a jangly sort of way. She wore more bangles than a curtain rod, but not at all David's type. It made him shudder when she smiled at him, which she did, often, when they passed on the campus. People joked that Zana had only come to Scrubbly because she missed the train to Hogwarts. What could she possibly want with David? He opened her message. It was just 2 lines. Heard you were lonesome. Fancy a drink? A drink? With the panda? David's blood ran cold. He hit reply and wrote something tactful. Working on an essay another time perhaps. From the corner of his eye, he saw a dragon's face. It was Grace, Sophie's listening dragon. He had never really looked at her closely before, but now that he did, he thought he could detect a glint of disapproval in her oval green eyes. He put his nose up close to her snout. Stop frowning. I turned her down, okay? The computer beeped again. Bergstrom's essay? What'd you get? David sighed and paddled his feet. An online conversation with the Mad Witch of Scrubbly was not supposed to be part of his evening's agenda, but there was one thing he was curious about. Dragons. He tapped the existence of. Someone tipped him off that I had one at home. I wonder who that could have been. Zana was in his tutorial group. She always had taken a keen interest when he mentioned gazooks. It had to be her. Yet to his surprise, she wrote, "Not guilty. Hand on my cold black heart." Yeah, right, muttered David, not sure he believed her, but it amused him, the way she made fun of herself. "Who then?" he typed. "Don't remember anyone saying it," she wrote. "Maybe when I went to the bathroom, perhaps?" Maybe, thought David, as a raindrop or two began to tickle the windows. He turned his head and watched a bullet of water ping the glass. If one of the students hadn't let on about the dragons, how could Bergstrom have made the connection? The computer beeped again. I got the Loch Ness Monster, by the way, just in case you were wondering. It's sort of a geobiological thing, as I've got a double major. I have to find out if a lake the size of Loch Ness would produce enough flora and fauna to support a quote-unquote monster of Nessie's size. Been grabbing pics off the net all day. Great essay. He's cool, isn't he, Bergstrom? He's weird, replied David. Did you shake his talisman? Pardon? David sighed loudly and hammered a response. He gave me an Inuit carving to hold and said it would show me my true destiny. He thought I might need some luck for his competition. Too right. Start saving, because I'm gonna storm it. Didn't get it. Oh, sorry. Too right. Start saving, because I'm gonna storm it. Didn't get a talisman to hold, though. I'm curious. What happened? What'd you see? This is dumb, thought David, sitting back. Why am I telling Zana this? He typed, nothing. Just a name. Gotta go now. Bye. Rain, come on, she wrote back quickly. Don't leave me hanging. Spill. I'm agog. No, Xana, you'll never let me live it down. Rain, play nice boy and I'll turn you into a squelchy toad. The cauldron is a bubbling beware. To his horror, David found himself laughing at that. But before he could type a response, Xana came back with another incentive. Okay, handsome, I'll make you a deal. You tell me about your mystic experience and I'll lend you a really smart book on dragons. That made David sit up and think. Handsome? He smiled at Grace. No doubt about it, that dragon was frowning. Sorry, you're going in the wardrobe, he told her. And he picked her up and put her on the shelf above his shirt rail. A reproachful dragon he could do without. He went back to the keyboard and tapped out a message. Why do you want to give me a book? Could help me win the comp. Well, I guess under this chimney sweep outfit, I'm just a plain old-fashioned girly at heart. Could bring it over tonight if you like. Have car, will travel, not busy, hint. Didn't know you had wheels. More convenient than a broomstick. Very funny, thought David. But she was very funny. Despite his reservations, he was warming to her. What's more, she was just the type to know about dragons. But bring her to the house? That was risky. A goth? What would Liz and Lucy think? And Bonington? She'd probably terrify him. Tonight's not good, he typed. How about Sunday afternoon? When Liz and Lucy would be out selling dragons at a local craft fair. It's a date, she tapped back. No, it isn't. You're bringing me a book. Relax, I don't bite, except when I'm draining necks. Come on, let's hear the name. David paused over the keyboard. It felt odd, giving the name away. As if he might be betraying some special kind of confidence. He looked at Gazooks, who was staring through the window, his gentle, curving smile reflected in the glass. David took that as a sign of approval. He typed out, Laurel. The reply was almost scorched the screen. No way! You're kidding me! David frowned and felt a shudder run down his spine. You know what it means? That's spooky, she wrote. You got that in Bergstrom's presence? Wow! Swear you're not pulling my braids? Got out of the playgroup years ago, Xana. Just tell me what it means, okay? I read it in a book about the Inuit once. Laurel is a teller of ways. He has all the legends of the Arctic in his head. David gulped. An Eskimo, he typed. It seemed an age before the answer came back. When it did, David almost wished he'd never asked the question. A cold breeze circled his neck and shoulders as Xana's explanation flickered up in blue. Thank you. Right. No, dummy. Where's your sense of romance? Laurel's not a man. He's a polar bear. I got my num-nums. I need to eat my num-nums. So for those who don't know, this book, Icefire, has approximately... Let me see. So this book approximately has 421 pages, and we're only at 59 at the moment. So what I'm probably going to do is I'm probably going to read a little bit further. But I'm gonna quickly have my num-nums. So I'm just gonna quickly let you guys... I think what I'm gonna let you guys do is I'm gonna let you guys enjoy the fireplace, and then I will be back once I finish my food. So I'll be right back. Sorry, it took me a little bit with the food. Hope you guys also took the time to get yourselves some food, some drinks, etc. as well, because I want to make sure that you guys are also hydrated as well. So I had just a quick meal and stuff, so that's all, really. But anyways, where were we? Right, we were in the next chapter here. Oh yeah. Bunnington's treasure. Within minutes of Xana's strange revelation, David said he would talk to her some more on Sunday, and broke the email connection. He closed the computer down and flopped on his bed, staring at the ceiling with his hands behind his head. He needed a timeout. Space to think. There was definitely something strange going on. First, Lucy with her wishing dragon, bringing the snow. Then Bergstrom wanting to talk about dragons. Then Bunnington being upset by the snow bear. And last but not least, Liz being spooked by the name Laurel. What was it about the bear that had rippled her nerves and made her drop the silverware? He was absolutely certain she knew the name, and that was why she would like to meet Bergstrom. And that in turn could only mean one thing. There had to be a primeval connection between dragons and bears. But what? Was it something to do with Gawain and his fire tear? The mysterious hidden fire? Hidden where? In the Arctic? A teardrop lost in 1,000 miles of ice? The ceiling creaked like an ice floe groaning. Liz moving around in the dragon's den above. If she knew the answer, she would never let it out. But maybe he could hear it from another source. Twice he had dreamed that a polar bear was trying to speak to him. Could that have been Laurel, the teller of ways, come to give up the ancient legend? David closed his eyes and threw down a challenge. If you are he whispered, show yourself. Tell me now about the fire. But the harder he tried, the more obstinate the gateway to the dream state seemed. To make matters worse, after half an hour or so, the door wafted open and Bunnington nudged his way into the room. He yattered something catty, then leaped up and sat on David's chest. He was showing no further signs of anxiety, just the usual inclination to thread his paws against a human rib cage before he settled down for the night. As the cat nodded off, so did David, on the bed, fully dressed. He slept fitfully and dreamed about Sophie's dragon, Grace. The next thing David knew, he was being chased by elephants, a whole herd of them trumpeting, "Xana! Who's Xana?" He jerked awake, panting, but thankfully untrampled. It was morning. Dawn had broken, grey and wet. The ice bear had disappeared from the garden. What had been a double helping of snow was now no more than a shallow island, isolated in the middle of the lawn. Even so, Bunnington was still watching over it. He was sitting on the windowsill, paws tucked under him, suspended in some kind of sentinel catnap. David frowned and touched the cat's whiskers, concerned that Bunnington had still not escaped whatever spectre, Laurel or otherwise, was haunting him. Bunnington burbled and shook himself awake. He ducked the tenant's hand and peered anxiously through the window. "It's gone," David told him. "All washed away. Come on, I'll show you." And gathering Bunnington into his arms, he cradled him chest high into the garden. Crossing the lawn was not a good idea. After only 4 paces, David's feet were coated with a soggy band of mud. But once sludged there was no going back. He took Bunnington up to the ice. They circled it. They studied it. They did not try to cross it. When David put him down, the cat put his nose to the lip of the island, pulled back suddenly, then trotted away to the bottom of the garden. Now what? David asked, chasing after him. Bonington, the polar bear isn't there. The cat was heading for a patch of wild ground covered over with weeds and crisscrossing den of rotting branches. Come out, David commanded, as Bonington wriggled into a hole. You'll get mucky and I'll get into trouble. With a sigh, David dug his hand into the mound and touched something prickly that wasn't a cat. Carefully he lifted the branches, and there, amid the bracken, was an old hairbrush, and a shoelace, and a key ring, and half a picture postcard of the seafront in Maine, and a golf ball, and a coaster, and what looked like chicken bones. 2 lollipops, a clothespin, a potato peeler, and the Scribbly Wildlife Hospital badge. There was even a felt-tipped pen that David remembered had once rolled under his bed. Bonington, he muttered, crouching down. How long has this been going on? Went the cat, a picture of innocence. You're a robber, David told him. A furry feline felon. And what's more, I'm having this back. He picked up the pen and tapped the cat playfully on the nose. I ought to tell Lucy you've got her hairbrush, too, but... He stopped and a wicked grin lit up his face. Why don't we play a little trick on her instead? How? Went Bonington. Watch, David whispered, and he drew a little face on the end of the brush, then wrote, My name is Spiky along the handle. He put the brush back and pulled the branches over it. Bonington gave him a short, sharp stare. You started it, said David, and he dusted off his trousers and squelched back to the house. He was met at the kitchen door by Liz. And what exactly have you been doing? Her gaze dropped straight to his mud-clogged feet. I was helping Bonington. Don't you go indicating my cat, young man. I'm sure he didn't willingly drag you around the garden, messing up your shoes with half a ton of dirt. He's a kleptomaniac. I beg your pardon? He swipes things and stores them in the garden. He's got a hiding hole near the tree. Liz pursed her lips. Leaning sideways into the kitchen, she grabbed an old toothbrush from a jar of utensils and slapped it into David's hand. Clean those shoes with the hose outside. Don't come in till they're spotless, or else. Honestly, calling my Bonington a thief, she sighed. He's a villain, David shouted. A tabby desperado. You'll find out, he muttered in his thoughts. When I will send Lucy on her hedgehog hunt. But the moment wasn't right for that. So David scrubbed his shoes clean and left them just inside the kitchen door to dry. Then kindly presented Bonington the toothbrush for his collection. He was heading to his room when he found 2 letters propped up against the microwave. Both were addressed to him. He ripped the first open and groaned. If that's the bank telling you you're overdrawn, I advise you to keep it quiet, said Liz, sweeping in from the hall just then. You owe me nearly 2 weeks of rent. David winced. It was indeed a letter from the bank reminding him he owed them quite a bit more than 2 weeks' rent. He tore the second letter open. Oh? Oh, said Liz. Oh, good? Or, oh, not so good. Not sure, said David, slipping into a chair. It's a letter from a publisher. The Hunt for Spiky. It's from a woman at Apple Tree Publishing, he said. The last people I sent Sneaker to. Well, don't keep me in suspense, said Liz. What does she have to say? David folded back the letter and read, Dear Mr. Rain, thank you for sending us Snigger and the Nut Beasts. While I do not feel the story is currently right for our list, I nevertheless enjoyed its freshness and charm and think with a little work that your style might be developed for today's children's market. Is she telling me I'm old-fashioned or what? Don't be so negative. What else did she write? Not much. I wondered if you would like to drop into my office sometime and have an informal chat over coffee. Please call and make an appointment, blah blah. Yours sincerely, Dillis Wotton. Gosh, how exciting. Coffee with a publisher. That's a step forward. Dillis Wotton? She sounds older than my grandmother, which means she will have a lot of experience, doesn't it? You get on your phone and call her. If Lucy finds out you passed up this chance, your name will be Mud. Speaking of which... I did them. David pointed to the mud-freed zone that was his shoes. No, I meant... Liz nodded to the door, just as Lucy breathed in, crying. Oh, the bear's gone flat. Can I wish for more snow? No, now Gareth is killed. He belongs to David. Lucy pouted and turned to the tenant. Wish for more snow for me, please. David shook his head. I think Laurel's gone into hibernation, don't you? Lucy's eyes lit up at once. Was Laurel the bear? That is the name I gave him, said David, smiling and flicking a glance at Liz. No silverware crashes this time. She merely reached for a dish towel and bunched it in her fist. When you said he wasn't a dragon, I thought he might as well be a bear. Grrr. Grrr, laughed Lucy. Are you going to do a story about him? David closed up the letter from Apple Tree Publishing. He didn't want Lucy to see it and start building up false hopes about Snigger. Maybe. Laurel did look the sort of bear who might be involved in lots of stories. I was even wondering if he hadn't bumped into a dragon or two on his Arctic travels, as they both like snow and ice. Lucy turned to her mum. Is that all right? Liz folded the dish towel and left it on the countertop. Dragons lived a long time ago, she murmured. I don't think the dynasties overlapped. Anyway, come on. It's time for school. Lucy hovered by David's shoulder. Wish for more snow, please. For Laurel. Now, we've had enough snow, he said. What if I wish to find Spiky instead? Huh? Upstairs. Hair done now, said Liz, turning Lucy before she could speak. We have no time for hedgehogs or any other creatures. And casting David a penetrating glance, she bustled Lucy out of the kitchen. Okay, thought David, smiling to himself. That round to me, I think. Now that we both know who Laurel is, let's see where we go from here. Here turned out to be nowhere, really. The next few days went by without incident. And, as the weekend loomed and Sunday came around, David found his thoughts turning once again to Zana. Liz and Lucy were leaving for a craft fair at 11, which meant there would be plenty of time between their departure and Xana's arrival. In other words, no embarrassing encounters, and that suited David fine. Until 11, everything went pretty smoothly. The Penny Kettle women spent their morning wrapping dragons in thick bubble wrap and packing them neatly into cardboard boxes, ready to be taken out to the car. This had meant a few quiet hours for David, who had stayed in his room catching up on college work and making further notes for his essay. He had still not played his trick on Lucy, and the ground had been far too wet underfoot. He didn't dare send her out on a wild hedgehog chase in filthy conditions. Liz would not see the funny side of that. But by late morning, a drying wind had blown over Scrubbly, raking the water out of the ground. And when Lucy cornered David on the stairs and asked, "Did you make a wish about Spiky yet?" David couldn't help but reply to her, "How can I? Your mom hasn't given me Gareth. But funnily enough, I thought I saw something small and pointy shuffling around in those brambles near." And Lucy was gone before he had finished. 2 minutes later she was back. David steeled himself for a sharp tirade. Strangely, it didn't come. Instead, she flashed past him and dived into a cabinet. She pulled out a flashlight and shut out again. Half an hour went by. David began to panic. Lucy had been hunting all that time. What's more, the clock was approaching noon, and that meant Zano could arrive at any minute. It didn't help when Liz threw the kitchen door open and asked him, Do you know much about cars? Cars? Engines. It's coughing. Won't start. What? It's got to start. I'll come and have a look. What's Lucy doing? Hedgehog patrol? Liz frowned and knocked the window. Lucy, come on. We're going to the fair. If we can start the car, that is. She joined David on the front drive a few moments later. The hood of the car was raised and David was looking distinctly puzzled. Well, not quite sure. It's probably a jizzle on your sproggle clonk or something. Liz tapped her foot. I'll call the mechanic. Just then, the gate swung open to the house next door, and Mr. Bacon, the penny kettle's neighbor, stepped out. He was dressed in a baggy old shirt and trousers held up by a pair of splendid yellow suspenders. David immediately started to tense. He didn't get along with Henry Bacon, who had a habit of sticking his nose into things. That morning was no exception. Henry saw the raised hood and immediately asked, Problem, Mrs. P? Car won't start. Sproggle on the gigawatts, according to David. Gigawatt? There's no such thing. Mr. Bacon brushed David aside, leaned across the engine and started to fiddle. Get in, Mrs. P. We'll soon have her running. Turn her over, if you would. Liz seemed a little uncertain, but she got in anyway and turned the ignition. The car spluttered but failed to start. Stop! Cried Henry, and tweaked another screw. Once more, please. Liz turned the key again. To David's relief, the engine shook and the car exploded into life. Liz left it running and came to offer thanks. Henry, you're a marvel. I'm indebted to you. My pleasure, Mrs. P. Learned a trick or two in my army days. Needs a good tune-up. Plugs and points. Happy to oblige. Any time at all. Thank you, she said, and would have added more had she not been nearly knocked over by an unrushing Lucy. Mom, she panted, her fine hair splattered all over her face. You've got to come and look. He's here. I found him. Who? Said Liz and David together. Frowning, Lucy turned to the tenant. Spiky, silly. Why didn't you tell me he was special? Special? A hairbrush with a funny face was special? Yes, said Lucy, eyes almost popping. Mom, he's the greatest hedgehog ever! And why might that be? Lucy danced and knocked her fists together. Because he's white! Okay, how many chapters do I want to... One... This one is a long one. Okay, I'm gonna read one more chapter, guys. One more chapter. Xana in the garden. White? Liz repeated, raising an eyebrow. White? Said Henry Bacon, wiping his nose and leaving an oil stain on his mustache. White? Sputtered David. With pink eyes, Lucy added, looking at all three adults in turn. That means... Well, I'll be darned, said Liz. Think you mean albino strictly, Mrs. P? Where? Rasped David. Where did you find it? In the brambles, said Lucy. Well, you said... Mom, can we please get the rabbit hutch out of the attic and make a real den for Spiky? Sorry, guys, I'm just picking something up from the floor. Not now. We'll be late for the fair, she said. Oh, boy. Aiming Lucy toward the car. Say goodbye to Mr. Bacon and David. Look after Spiky, Lucy shouted to David. Yeah, right, he muttered, totally confused. How could Lucy have missed a hairbrush and found a real hedgehog instead? Sighing, he waved the car goodbye. It chugged unconvincingly up the crescent, giving another little cough along the way. Are you sure that car's all right, Henry? Fit as a fiddle, Mr. Bacon sniffed. Mind you, if you want a decent vehicle, that's the thing to be in, boy. He pointed down the driveway. A sleek black car had just pulled up. David grunted in agreement. Bet it costs a bit to look after, though. Wow. Suddenly his mouth was wide enough to take an apple whole. The driver of the car had just stepped out. It was none other than Xana. Good Lord, Mr. Bacon exclaimed as Xana came clip-clopping down the path. She looked like a tall, dark mermaid with a lower half enclosed in a tight-fitting skirt that flared at the ankles like a large tail fin. To David's relief, she hadn't ghosted her face, and looked quite stunning in a shocking sort of way, with her eyes shadowed purple and a plum-red rinse washed into her hair. But with a silver-studded dog collar around her neck and at least 2 rings for every finger, she stood out like a runaway scarecrow in the sleepy leafiness in the wayward crescent. Fearing Mr. Bacon would either faint or worse go after her with a stick, David moved forward to explain that Xana was merely a friend from college who had come to drop off a book and en route to a fancy dress party. When, to his astonishment, she veered towards the penny kettle's neighbor and said, "Hi, Mr. Bacon. Gosh, didn't know you lived around here." Mr. Bacon flicked a crusty glance at David. "Have you come to see him, Susanna?" "Sure have," she smiled, and before David could stop her, she leaned over and plopped a kiss on his cheek. "Hi, David." "Hi," he said, blushing. "How do you two know each other?" Xana swished around, tassels flying. "The library, of course. Mr. Bacon is the best librarian in the world. He finds loads of interesting books for me, don't you?" "Why are you wasting your time on him?" said Henry. Xana smiled and said, "I'm educating him in the ways of dragons." She plopped the book into David's hands. A large hardcover with a cover picture of a sleeping dragon. "Thanks," he said. "Do you, want to come in?" "First mistake," she said, slipping past him. "Inviting a vampire over your threshold." She giggled, showing a set of perfect white teeth, said goodbye to Henry, and then stepped into the house. "Okay," said David, banging the door shut as he followed her in. "Liz, my landlady, isn't at home, so promise me you won't do anything." "Shush!" she interrupted, flapping a hand. She stooped sideways and peered wide-mouthed up the stairs, and then rolled her eyes to every corner of the hall. "Wow, this house is really buzzing." "Yeah, it's the fridge. The thermostat is wacky." Xana turned a circle. "Rain, don't be dumb. This place is singing. Can't you feel the energy? These walls must have a fantastic aura." "Yeah, right," he said. "Cup of tea? This way." He hurried her toward the kitchen. "Honestly, you really can't feel it?" "No. Sit down, and don't scare Bonington." "Oh, you've got a cat!" With a squeal of excitement, Xana scuttled across the kitchen to where a dazed-looking Bonington was hanging over his food bowl. Xana crouched down and tickled his ears. "Hello, Bonington. I'm David's friend Xana. He thinks I'm very strange because I dress in dark clothes and talk about things he doesn't understand. But we don't care about him, do we? You're lovely, aren't you? Would you like to be my friend?" "Leave him alone," David scolded. "He's very sensitive. Don't lead him astray." Xana stood up and flicked back her hair. "I hope you're not going to be horrible all day. I did bring you your book. I did bring you a book after all." David flipped through it and then put it on the table. "Looks good. I'll check it out later, thanks. Is that really your car out front?" Xana nodded and looked around the kitchen. "Rich dental daddy. Spoils me rotten. Is this one of your landlady's dragons?" She touched a finger to the dragon on top of the fridge. "Yes," said David. "One of many." "It's cute. Why are its ears so frail?" "It's a listening dragon. And before you ask, I don't know what that means. It's probably spying on us. If its eyes turn purple, run for it. Quick." "Purple is my favorite color," said Xana, closing her eyes so that David could see her painted lids. "Is that how the dragons come alive then?" Like this. She spread her fingers and flashed her eyes open. David gave her a withering look. Just a joke. Chill out. Is this Lucy? She pointed to the photograph of Liz with the snowball. No, it's Liz, when she was a kid. She keeps that snowball in the freezer. Really? Can I see it? No, behave. Spoil sport. Where was this taken, the photo? I mean, doesn't look like here, with all those furs in the background. I don't know, said David. I've never asked. Look, I'm going out into the garden for a minute. Stay here and bother Bunnington. I won't be long. I like gardens, chirped Zana, following him. Zana, I'm only going to look at a hedgehog. I like hedgehogs, she added. Come on, Bunnington. And she was out of the door before David could stop her, with Bunnington trotting along at her ankles. As they approached the chunk of ice, Bunnington gave it a good wide berth. There was a snowman there, David explained. It spooked him a bit. He hasn't got over it. Zana slowed to a halt. She looked at Bunnington, then at the ice. No, he senses something. Animals are far more perceptive than humans. They can touch other planes of existence. You know, the first thing I thought of when I looked at that... Ice, David said facetiously. The Arctic ice cap to be exact. David groaned and rolled his eyes. Hang on, I'll get a lollipop stick and we can mark the North Pole. I mean it, Rain. I get impressions. Things come to me. I'm never wrong. Think about it. What's it doing here when all the rest of the snow has gone? David stared at the ice with his hands in his pockets, melting very slowly. Zana shook her head. It's Laurel, she muttered. It's definitely a sign. Ow! Went Bunnington, padding away. See? He knows. No, he doesn't. All he cares about are chunky chunks and tough good treats. David shook his head at her and headed up the garden. He had all the weirdness he could take right now. Zana, Laurel, Bunnington, white hedgehogs. He snatched the brambles aside. No Spiky and no catty treasure trove either. Frowning suspiciously, he turned to the cat. Where's your loot? Bunnington looked at the empty space as if it were a total mystery to him. Don't give me that. You've moved it all, haven't you? Brrr, went Bunnington and sat down to give his paws a wash. What's happening? Asked Zana, catching up. That cat is a thief and a smuggler, said David. He explained about the hairbrush and how Bunnington and Lucy and Spiky, it seemed, had all turned the tables on him. Serves you right, Zana said, laughing. Cats are far smarter than you think. White hedgehog? That's interesting. According to ancient folklore, white hedgehogs were a symbol of... Don't, said David, holding up his hands. I don't want any more mystical babble. For the first time, Zana appeared quite hurt. I don't understand you, she said. You tell me stuff about Inuit talismans and how the name Laurel pops up out of nowhere, but when I come to your garden, it's obvious that something strange is going on. So obvious that even your cat knows about it. And all you do is try to deny it. I know you want to make sense of it, Rain, but you won't let me help you because of all this. She flicked her hands down the front of her skirt, folded her arms, and brushed her way past him. I'm sorry I came. You can keep the dragon book until you hand in your essay. See you at college. Bye. She was halfway to the house before David turned and came running after her. Zana, stop. I didn't mean to be rude. I'm sorry. I'm just confused, I suppose. I keep having dreams about him. Zana paused and dropped her shoulders. Laurel? I think so. A bear, anyway. He keeps trying to speak, but when he opens his mouth, something always wakes me. Zana turned slowly. As she did, she caught sight of the dragons in the window of the den. That's because you're scared of what you might hear. Pardon? Your logical mind is shutting off your subconscious because you won't allow yourself to believe what's happening. It's like Tinkerbell in Peter Pan. Tink dies unless you convince yourself that fairies truly exist. Fairies? David gave his nose a skeptical twist. Forget it, said Zana, and turned away again. Okay, he said quickly, holding her back. Let's say I believe it. Why would a polar bear want to talk to me? Zana glanced back at the ice. Don't know, but it won't be through chance. Laurel is a legendary guardian of the Arctic. If he's here, that means he's come to help you, or protect you, perhaps. Or he wants something from you. You've been singled out. Oh, great, said David as the hairs on his neck began to tingle. Single out? By a dream bear? For what? Don't know, said Zana with a shrug. But I bet my last bangle it's tied up with them. She nodded at the window of the dragon's den. David drew a shallow breath. That was one thing he could agree upon. In this house, everything centered around the dragons. Liz knows the name Laurel, he added. It means something to her, but she won't say what. Tell you something else. She wants to meet Bergstrom. That's pretty weird, don't you think? Zana parted her lips with a gentle smack. She stretched back her neck and let her hair shower down to the level of her waist. For once David saw her as a girl, not a goth, and in profile she was really quite beautiful, he thought. Think I'll have that cup of tea now, she said, boldly looping her arm through his. And break out the cookies, we need to talk. About Laurel? Laurel, the dragons, your landlady, everything. It's time to unlock a few secrets, David. Secrets? Of 42 Wayward Crescent. Alright, guys. So, from what I've read so far, I must have read about... actually, how many chapters have I read? 1, 2, 3. How much? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So I've read about 9 chapters, which is not bad actually for about 2 to 3 hours. So basically, guys, I am gonna end it here. I know it's a very short stream, but yeah, we're slowly going back into like a regular routine in terms of streaming. So let's see here. Let's go to the ending screen here. And get the credits rolling. Let's see who's live right now. Okay, so we've got Geo is live, Mask is live, Strike Rover is live, Vex, Purity, and Krulex is live. Let's see here. Let's see what we can raid today. I guess we'll just raid Purity here. I think she is currently playing Atelier Sophie, the Alchemist of the Mysterious Book. So I don't know if that's also like an ASMR, but it looks more like a game than an ASMR. But give Purity lots of love and support, guys. I appreciate for everybody who come into this ASMR stream. Much appreciated. Raid out message. I guess we could just say just say Dragon Raid, I guess. Oh, like hedgehog raid. Let's go. Let's do that instead. For followers, please use this. For subscribers, please use this. And I will be streaming tomorrow with, I believe it was, I don't know if that was art or craft or not. Let me just quickly double check before you guys go. Where is it? I will be hopefully finishing the Cult of the Lamb tomorrow. If not, it will be in the next following stream when I play Cult of the Lamb. Anyways, guys, love you all, and I'll see you guys in tomorrow's stream. Bye bye!